realized that not everybody would be interested in a conversation like this. You have to have been on the path for a while. The pathless path of non-duality, to appreciate some of this. But even if you're not, you might be able to just relate to how I talk about divisions, because that can apply to anything. Give me 1 second, guys. You may be able just to relate to how how the mind, it doesn't even have to be around spiritual awakening, how the mind creates its divisions and its factions. And the point being that as a non-dual realization will show you the illusory nature of that. If you take it deep enough, it will. The reason that I'm sharing like this is because as people have been coming to this work, they've been asking questions like that. Like, well, what about this non-dual teaching that I was involved in? Because they'll get here and they'll start doing inquiry, and it does open up doors for them that were not open before. So with inquiry, they're able to see through this or see through that, whereas before that seemed to be out of reach. And then the question arises, like, should I have loyalty to this non-dual thing? Like, is this part of this? It's very much part of what we're doing. It's the foundation of what we're doing. Very, 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 very much. And there's no reason to exclude any of that at all. If you recognize there are no walls of division between them anyway, it's all in the mind. But of course, you're with teachers, many of them who will not talk like this, and so it will make you think that the walls are real, so that when you leave the confines of one set of walls, the teaching, and you come into a different method, your mind is like, what do I do with that? Is this like that? Especially if you were with someone who spoke in a way that made it seem like their concepts are the only reality, their way of looking at it is the only reality. It can be very confusing. Let's see what else here along this topic. I have a lot of notes from conversations, questions that people have asked me along with this topic actually. So nothing appearing as excruciating pain. For me, having the chronic pain was the gift that further allowed me to not buy into the divisions. Because having that chronic pain and processing that, it helped me to see the limitations of things. Let me see, I want to make that clear. In other words, with that pain, this is excruciating pain at times. It was excruciating. So just listen to my experience for a second. Before that, my experience was just quietness, like non-separation, rather deeply peaceful. And although the chronic pain was there at that time, it was way in the background. So then as the chronic pain developed, it became really loud in my experience. Like within that silence or that unknown experience of just thisness was this incredibly painful thing right in the middle of it. So having that thing was such a gift because it's like right there, all there is this. This isn't helpful. All there is this. Or the non-dual seeing, the non-dual awareness itself isn't helpful. And even the other things that people might say on top of that aren't helpful, like, it's not happening to anyone. It's apparently chronic pain happening to an apparent individual. And all those other things, see, those are helpful in one way, right? They have been helpful and to many people. So not excluding them, they're very helpful. I'm just saying the limitations get seen when you have these extreme conditions. So it makes me empathize or have compassion for people who come to the non-dual teachings and they're not met. Their experience isn't met. So they might say, well, I have all this trauma, and they're met with these pointers, again, which are very helpful in one way. And then when it comes to these extreme states, they're not very helpful at all. Just like there are limitations with inquiry that I talked about, there are limitations with that way of seeing things. So that pain became another indicator that the divisions are not real and that you can't get everything you need in one place. That's the way of saying it. And if we create walls of division, we may falsely think that everything we need is found in one place, like the whole truth and nothing but the truth is found in one place or one way of talking about something. When what I needed was a deeper somatic exploration. In order to deal with that chronic pain, I didn't need those non-dual pointers. They weren't helpful. And so then I think about all the people going to those meetings. So or those talks, those retreats, where they're getting those kinds of pointers when in fact their body is holding on to something, or that in their body there's something incredibly painful, unresolved trauma, or chronic pain, or something like that, which is mostly unconscious anyway. So it isn't really helpful to say it's happening to no one or it's just arising in awareness, because that's very elementary. There are unconscious identifications within the sensation. And I needed skill to be able to pull those up and see those. So I also want to share what my experience is like now, just for a moment, as the pain has gone away and the repressions have been integrated, the anger repression and everything. So there's some talk, of course, where people will say, well, the belief in a person or the appearance of the person arises within this, or this appears as an apparent person. And there's even some talk about how, well, beliefs may arise within this, that happens, but to no one. Might even say, like, deficiency stories. If you take it all the way, deficiency stories or trauma arise to no one. All kind of true on one level, really. So I can't even disagree with it. But look to how it's limiting. Because beliefs actually don't arise after a while. Like, certainly if there's something to look at, one looks at it. But that's what I notice about the realization, is how things stop arising. So the beliefs, there is no self. They're just these patterns of thought, feeling, and sensation. And when these patterns are strongly connected, like the thoughts are strongly velcroed to the feeling or sensation, it gives what we would call the appearance of belief programming. That's the only thing there is no self. So really all we're contending with are these beliefs and these patterns appearing to no one, literally. So it's all integrated. All that Neo-Advaita stuff is accurate. That all these patterns, these beliefs, are appearing to no one. these patterns, these programs, and these beliefs, that is the selfing. That is it, right? The conditioning is the selfing. And the conditioning is rising to no one. You could say it's a rising to awareness. But if beliefs are still arising, then the identification with self is still there. That's the point that I want to make. So it doesn't feel quite accurate to just say the beliefs arise and fall to no one. I mean, yes, that's true, but there is no one. There is no one. Yes, there's no one. It's the beliefs that give the appearance of someone. So the beliefs, that's what we focus in on inquiry, the beliefs. Because there's no self. It's just those beliefs, those programs. You follow me? So the experience of the realization for me is that when those beliefs are deconstructed, they stop arising. The deficiency stories stop arising. It's really quiet. So that leads us to the unknown. It doesn't lead us there, just talking about that now. The unknown. Just being here with me for a second. If just being here without thought is available to you, rest in that way without thinking for a moment. It's okay if there's thinking. Just notice that that's the known, right? And that's where the programming is, the non-dual programming or the fortress making. It happens when the known arises and there's like an identification with it. So, what is the unknown? Is it that word? So imagine if someone were asking me this, if we were pointing to the unknown and someone says, is that it? The word? Like, is there something about the word? There's nothing about the word. The word isn't it. We don't even know that. We don't know what this is. Is this awareness? We don't really know that. Not in the unknown. Don't know what this is, or that it is of this. Is it this? No, it's not that. That's the known. Is there no self here? It's unknown. Unknown, that's too much information. In the unknown, there's no fortresses, none. In the unknown, there are no spiritual traditions or methods. There's none. There's nobody who knows anything about non-duality or liberation or embodiment or anything in the unknown. There's not even liberation. It's not known. So as soon as thought arises, it's like we know something, and that's where the fortresses happen in the way that we hold, so to speak, or way that that's held by no one. but still there's the mechanism of identification by no one. That mechanism, we recognize that in our experience, even if we don't find a self. There's this, at least this mechanism that we're talking about the known. But here I'm talking about it in a way that points to it. So, what fortress do you build with your language? And to what extent have you mistaken your language for reality? And how much do you have to exclude in order to do that? A tremendous amount of information has to be excluded when you start building your fortress of concepts, no matter what they are, if you hold them tightly. You literally, once you build your fortress, if you believe the concepts of it, you have to literally exclude the rest of humanity, everything else, in favor of your one fortress. This is where inquiry, again, inquiry has limitations, but this is one place where it's helpful, because we can build a fortress with our non-dual language and then have no tool to deconstruct the fortress because we've shut inquiry out, for example. So let's say we've had a realization and suddenly there's a fortress we've created around us, a sense of division, like my way or the only way is the only way kind of thinking. But we can't get out of that with the same mind that created it. So we can't get out of that by repeating the same pointers, because the pointers themselves reinforce the fortress. So something new that could come in would be inquiry on your fortress. That would be something new coming from outside the fortress, ready to deconstruct. And so I did that. After the non-dual realization, the fortress of concepts that started to form for me around non-duality, I began to question each one of them, letting them all just fall into silence. And then it's more like the unknown. And then without that fortress there, that was how I was able to create, or that's how the creation of the inquiries happened, is that it wasn't holding tight to any fortress. Now the inquiries can become their own fortress, right? But inquiring into that's illusory. That's not real. One place to start is noticing the defense and attack that happens for you when something or someone, apparently, comes into your view and in some way says things that are different than your understanding of things. Like even subtly different. Like, say you're a non-dualist of some sort without a tradition or something, and then a Buddhist comes in and starts to say things that don't comport with the reality that you've created with your language. Or maybe you first try desperately to find commonality. Like, oh, do you mean this? Yeah, I see that. That's in my fortress too. You have that. We desperately try to somehow make them congruent because it would be threatening to recognize that our fortress is illusory. It would be really threatening, but we might not own that when it's happening. We might not be awake to the fear, but what we might notice is how we defend and attack our fortress of concepts. Like, it's no different than defending any kind of ego-based thing. It's just the language is spiritual language. Notice, like, for example, social media is a great place for spiritual practice, including those rooms where people post spiritual stuff, because that is a laboratory for you to start breaking down the walls of your fortress. So watching for the defense and attack that comes up. When something that you hold dear a pointer, a belief, a framework is threatened in some way. And then you've got to straighten the other person out, right? This is where it gets crazy because when you do that, when we do that, it's like we're assuming there's a bird's eye view of everything. Like somehow you or I can stand back and look at all of it objectively and comment and say, what you're sharing isn't objectively true. That's not really how consciousness works. We're all in our relative subjective fortresses, even with our non-dual phrasing, and that's all subjective stuff. And we don't have a bird's eye view. There's no teacher or person or anyone on earth who can stand outside of all concepts and see things the way that they really are. We're always looking from within the filter of our present language, always. There's no way to step out of that and just look at things for how they are. But what happens in these spiritual debates is that people begin to falsely assume that they're seeing things the way it really is. And so they'll correct other people because the other person's view doesn't fit with the way things really are. But there is no such thing as the way things really are. This is the myth of the given, which is this thing that Ken Wilber brought to spirituality, and it's almost like it falls on deaf ears. He's saying essentially that there is no pre-given reality. Not oneness, not anything. There's no pre-given reality. It's our consciousness that interfaces with reality that gives us the experience of something. It's our consciousness. But we forget that it's our consciousness doing it. So we think that when we're experiencing something, that's a pre-given reality. Follow me on this. Can you be radically transformative to see this? And so that's what's happening in those moments when we stand. We think we stand with a bird's eye view of things. We think that there's a pre-given reality, and conveniently, I get to see it and nobody else does. Isn't that convenient? Does that sound like anything to you? Maybe ego? Think about it. What is ego? But it's the false assumption that the way that I see things is the way things really are. That's one way of describing ego. The way that I see the world and things is the way that it really is. It's not any different with spiritual language. Now I've had experiences and insights and interpretation of that, and now I think that the way that I see reality is the way that it actually is. But what if what's really happening is something totally different? What if what's happening is that people all over the earth are having these experiences, these awakening experiences that are essentially non-conceptual. They're all similar in a certain way of seeing beyond division, separation, beyond concepts. But then as we interpret it later according to our tradition or things that we've heard from our teacher, and then we start to build our fortress from that. See, and then the fortress, even though the experience or the shift may have been showing us non-separation, the fortress that we build is then around separation. And it's the same mechanism that's involved in any ego story. It's no different. Because we believe that the way that we see reality is the way it really is. To me, this explains why you see that teachings don't seem to agree with each other, and that's kind of baffling to people sometimes. It's like, isn't what Scott Kilby's saying the same as what Teacher X is saying, or not? You're probably responding to the appearance of these fortresses. It's not like we're supposed to all think the same way. I'm not saying that. Or that we go to a place where none of us are thinking at all. Because really, there's nothing wrong with thinking. It is what it is. What I'm saying is that when we think, can we be aware of what we're doing? Like literally be that awake to when we're speaking, we're not actually commenting on reality as it is, no matter how profound it is. Remember, the teaching is Maya too. And at least one of the traditions says that the teaching is illusory too, the language. I'll stop talking about this in a day or so. It's just been on the surface. So I just want to get it out. So I used to feel this way, but the peacemaker identity was involved with it, and it was more about not liking conflict. Can you feel into that? Because you have to watch for that. Like these divisions do create conflict. So if you're a peacemaker ego, you may come to this conversation from that, as if what Scott's saying is that we should all agree with each other or hold hands and sing kumbaya. That's not what I'm saying. This is a seeing. It's not even making peace. It's a seeing that whatever fortress you've built is completely illusory. It is not objective reality. There's no pre-given reality. So when you're speaking, you would never then assume again that you're pointing to anything that's just inherently here or out there, even if they're spiritual insights. And once you know that, then you don't have a dog in that fight. You don't believe that your thoughts are ultimately true, even your spiritual thoughts. And then separation gets broken down even more in that. And being able to see the other even more clearly because our fortress isn't there. Even the other that is in a different tradition or way of understanding. How do we really see each other if we're hiding behind these fortresses? We can't really see each other because we keep seeing that that person there believes something that isn't real. Well, what if we're all believing something that isn't real? What if we're all doing that? Even what if even the spiritual realizations and insights aren't ultimately real? They're just the place that we've landed on for now. Then nobody gets to have the real. Nobody gets to put their flag anywhere and say, I'm the one that has discovered the real reality. So my concepts are the only real concepts. It's ridiculous if you really see it. It's laughable how we continue to do this. I experienced the fortress when I used to interview teachers. In the early days of my realization, I would interview teachers on something called the Kilo Logs. And the teachers were very sweet and open. I had really good conversations with many of them, and friendships formed from many of those. And there were a few teachers who I was a bit reluctant to approach because I felt like they wouldn't be open, and they weren't. And the kinds of things that I heard were, well, you're not within my tradition, so I can't really do an interview with you, or something along those lines that hinted at, well, my fortress is the only real fortress, so I can't speak to anyone outside the fortress. Sorry. No offense. That's unfortunate because we could have had a conversation about how the fortresses aren't real. But if one treats their fortress as real, we can't have that conversation. I think this is up for me because someone came to the retreat who really much, we had a retreat last weekend, KI retreat, Nevada City, and someone came and had a bunch of already practices and a tradition that they were already involved in. And at the retreat, we were trying to focus on KI because that's why people came, is to learn these inquiries. And so the person came and was finding great benefit with the inquiries, but I think that felt maybe a little bit threatening to the person's tradition. And they kind of, out of fear, kind of maybe went back to kind of, well, what about this over here? I don't want to do this KI if it means I can't do this. We finally said to the person, you can absolutely do all of that because from my viewpoint, there aren't any walls between that. You just use whatever works. But it brought something up in this person. And I think that suffering isn't really necessary. The suffering that people feel, or they seem to have to feel when they encounter something new that threatens what they already think they know or what they're doing. And part of that comes from because if we're in traditions that build that up for us, like that send the signal that this is the only way, this, this is the Kilby inquiries, that's the only way. All the other ways, they don't work. Or they're not real or true. If we talk like that, I can see how that happens. So it's really important for me that when I'm saying things about non-dual teachings that you understand it's included. It's not I'm against them. It's can we include them? Can we see that there's no wall there and include that? And then also move beyond that. Like, are there limitations to these things? Can we go deeper? Can we integrate all of it? There are no walls. So in people's personal practice, I might say, continue to go to your teacher because the way that they point to awareness is very direct and helpful. And, and, not but, and include somatic inquiry for whatever that misses. So including, transcending with including. Can you see yourself everywhere? What do I mean by that? If I'm listening to a teaching talking about all there is this, nothing being everything, I see myself there because, like, there's truth in that. Yes. And then when I see someone saying there's this deconstructive process or this process of somatic processing that's helpful, I see myself there. See how that's helpful. No division there, no paradox. Seeing yourself everywhere. Can you see yourself in the Buddhist that walks up to you and paints a picture of their framework, even if they think that as reality? Can you entertain it that way? Can you see yourself in the other? Can you let that picture be painted without feeling like you need to defend it, defend your way of seeing things or attacking the other person? Not out of peacemaking, but as a real seeing that nobody has reality. Literally nobody. Nobody has reality. So when people are talking, they're not talking about reality. If you can think of it that way. They're never talking about reality. They're only talking about their subjective experience. The world that they see, or the universe that they see, according to the concepts that they hold. And then that's all that's happening. Then, in that sense, no one would feel threatening anymore. No one. Not even a Christian fundamentalist who may have dogmatic ideas would not feel threatening in the same way. No one would feel threatening anymore, psychologically, if you can see this. But if you're with someone and you can't see it, if when they start to paint their reality, you mistake that as if there is a reality out there and that's not it. Follow me? That will bring more of a sense of division and separation. Coming to that situation that way is a recipe for further conflict and division. All because of the myth of the given. You've missed it. You missed the myth of the given. The myth of the given was seen by a number of philosophers who deconstructed our language in every single direction that you can imagine, postmodern philosophers. And essentially what they discovered is that language, again, it's language that gives us our reality. It's language. so that there isn't a pre-given reality. It's whatever language game that you buy into now, that's the reality that you see. So whatever political viewpoints you buy into, whatever spiritual ones, whatever any kind of viewpoint, that's the reality that you see because of those viewpoints, those thoughts. And you can never get beyond that. You could just say, okay, if I rest in silence in the unknown, my reality, my concepts go away, and there's just the unknown. And that doesn't belong to anyone, though. There's no fortresses there. There's no self there. There's no self that knows there's no self there. That's not known. Let me see what else we have. Just a few minutes left. Trying to see if there's anything else I want to add on here. Everyone's just doing the best that they can with the conditioning that is presently there. So this is all blameless. Everyone's innocent. That's the way I see it. We're innocent of our identifications. If we knew otherwise, we wouldn't identify with them. We're innocent towards the fortress. If we really saw that it was there, that our mind created it, we would learn how to let go of it. But we're innocent in the sense that we can't see it. It's too close. It's just like with ego. Any form of ego is too close. If we could really see it and know that it's just illusion, if we could really know that, it could drop away, but we don't. So everyone's innocent. Can't see what you can't see. And that leads me to my last point is, yes, nothing appears as excruciating pain, nothing being everything. That's not enough of a pointer, is it? That's the point. I'll be back with more of this. Probably you'll have to sit through more of it. But I think some of you are enjoying it, and maybe it's even helping to break down some of these walls that maybe you still have in your experience. Be more of that coming.